Zavala, come in.
It'll be okay.
I have a feeling she can take care of herself.
Alright, welcome back to my Legendary Build series. I'm on Sentinel today, finally, doing the last mission in the Lightfall campaign on Legendary difficulty, Solo Flawless. I've been saving my favorite subclass for last. That's right, out of all 15 subclasses that we have, 3 classes, 5 subclasses, I would pick Sentinel, and pretty much been my favorite since D1. So if you haven't been following this series, this is the last episode or video in the series. 16 legendary builds, 16 legendary campaign missions, and basically the idea behind the series is that I do all 16 legendary campaign missions that we have through Witch Queen and Lightfall, Solo Flawless, using all of the builds that we have available, which is 15, and never using any weapon more than once, no seasonal artifact mods at all. So these builds in theory should hold up in future seasons. If you're watching this in another season, a lot of this should be relevant still. And then, like I said, no weapons are being used more than once. So 16 different exotic weapons, 32 different legendary weapons, and obviously 16 different exotic armors. And so with that said, if you've missed out on the series, well, roughly 85% of you viewing this video, and most of my videos, aren't subscribed. So if you want to go and hit that sub button, you won't miss any future videos, and community posts as well. There's when I'm not posting videos, I'm putting up posts on the community, and you guys are voting on some of my polls. Last week I put up 4 options for thumbnails for the last mission in the Legendary Witch Queen campaign, the Ritual, just to see which image you guys would pick for a thumbnail. And I actually picked the second most voted on, not because I didn't like the first one. I actually tried to make the most voted on one work, but unfortunately with the text and the icons it ended up cutting off my Lorelei Splendor helmet, so it was a little bit unfortunate that the camera wasn't panned out enough so that I could encapsulate that full image in the thumbnail. So I used the second most voted on, and yeah, so if you want to sub, you can keep up with things over there. Come Season of the Deep, I should have a new series out, and yeah, so stay tuned. Now, in this video, I'm going to be going over, obviously, the legendary build on hand, Sentinel, and I'm going to also be going over the encounters, the environment, the enemies. This is something that I haven't done enough on throughout this series. Previous to this series, if you followed my channel, I've done a lot of solo flawless master nightfalls and weekly campaign missions with champions, which is more challenging content than the legendary campaign missions. And in those nightfalls and weeklies, I tend to cover not just, like, you know, build crafting and theory and all that, but also the actual encounters and how to play your, you know, using the environment to your advantage and dealing with certain enemy types. So given that this is the hardest mission in the Lightfall campaign and the last mission, I figured I may as well cover some of that PvE stuff, because that is basically the deciding factor in how you build craft, how you theory craft. So it is pretty important. I'll go over it. And then I'm also, along with the concept of the build and the theory, I will be going over the exotic that I chose to synergize, the specific aspects and fragments and abilities, my 3 weapons of choice, Militia's Birthright, Monarque, Commemoration. I'll go over the gameplay loop, the combat mods, and the armor charge, what we're using it for, how we're getting it, and finally the strategy to beat Calus. And of course I'm going to have a dim link in the description, but you know, I don't recommend that you copy and paste my dim links. If you can, you're more than welcome to. That's why I include them, if not to copy and paste, at least for reference. But there's no one build fits all. Every mission is different, and everybody plays this game differently, has different strengths and weaknesses, and just enjoys the game in different ways. So you just take bits and pieces out of the building videos that you watch, and you make something that works for you. So without further ado, I guess I'll get into those topics. Encounters, environments, and enemies for desperate measures. So mostly open spaces, which is great for movement, great for shield bash, just for getting around the map quickly. The general enemies that we'll be encountering are phalanxes, backpack pusher cabals, that's what I'm calling them, which are also exploders, essentially, because if you blow up their backpack and you're too close to them, you could die. There's going to be some strand shielded ultras or majors throughout the entire mission. And then there's also Scion boopers, not the Scion snipers, the ones that shoot the waveform of void at you and then it sends you up like a trampoline. There's going to be yeah, so those enemies are going to be littered throughout the entire mission. Then starting off with at the beginning of the mission, we're going through the Zephyr concourse, and there's basically a thresher there, which you have to kind of watch out for, but once you make it past that first wave of ads, it kind of goes away, so nothing to worry about too much there. The platforming section, which is where I'm at right now, I'm already a good part of the way through, but there's 2 threshers in total to watch out for. The first thresher can really, well, it can kill you very quickly. Threshers, Bungie nerfed the threshers because at the beginning of the season they were like one-shotting everybody. And then of course we also have 1 tormentor to deal with in this section. After that we go to the basically have the Great Cabal War is what I'm calling it, and there we have tanks to deal with constantly. We have boss tier tormentors, which are on a whole nother level than normal tormentors, and also some ultra yellow bar gladiators and dogs that will come charging at you. And then of course we have the, I don't know if you want to call it a platforming section or a jumping puzzle, but the transition between the war and the descent into the Veil to face off against Calus, which is a very engaging transition. Yeah, just the music, the never-ending verticality where you're just descending into this great mystery. Very cool, very engaging. Yeah, if I can choose to do any of the encounters in this mission again, it would obviously be Calus. I mean, the boss fight itself, but also that transition period where you go down into the Veil. Love it. And then of course we've got Calus, which is where we're gonna need to balance some balance how we play the platforms, the catwalks, and basically be aware to the ads that we're going to be fighting, where they're at, and just some environmental awareness, as well as neutralizing tormentors and how to bait Calus. So, given all of that knowledge, which you could only really get by playing this mission at least once, so that you know what you're dealing with, you can then come up with a build concept. And so basically, you need to play at range, you need survivability, and you need good movement. So, grenades work well for playing at range. Your shoulder charge is going to work well for movement, and you want your weapons to cover every possible scenario. So boss damage, ad clear, crowd control, movement. This is solo, flawless gameplay for an entire mission, which is, you could almost compare this mission to a dungeon because it's nearly as long. And the encounters are nearly as difficult, if not more difficult in some cases. And when you do anything like that, solo flawless, you need to have a balanced build. You don't necessarily want to have a niche build that is only good at one thing. You want to cover all your bases. So I'm going with offensive Bulwark for 400% grenade energy regeneration. Armamentarium for double the grenades, and while we're at it, we may as well make our grenades do lingering damage over time, and we can make our grenades trap ads and debuff major targets and bosses, well, Calus, and we can also make those grenades give us anti-barrier volatile rounds, so i.e. Vortex grenades, the king of grenades on Void. And so, all that said, that's basically Echo of Undermining, Echo of Lingering, and Instability. Then we may as well use the Bastion aspect for survivability, and for constantly feeding our offensive Bulwark. We're going to need to neutralize the Tormentors, so we can do that with a very easy weapon, Disorienting Grenade Launcher, aka blinding grenade launcher. And then I'm going to be using a Void machine gun and La Monarque, the Void exotic bow, for basically everything. We'll seize on the overload, poison, tick damage. These two weapons combined will give us the potential for big damage. They can also add clear. It can spread volatile, and since we're doing that, we may as well capitalize on our 3 copies of Void Surge mods on our legs for an extra 22% damage at all times to our Void weapons when charged with armor. And then since we're ranged, we want easy armor charge for long periods of time, so combat mods such as Shield Break Charge can come in handy, because then we don't have to put ourselves at risk to go collect Orbs of Power. And we can use double time dilation, so that if we do pick up an Orb of Power or we do get that Shield Break Charge, then we've got armor charge for 18 seconds per charge, which is pretty substantial. If you have 3 copies of armor charge, that's basically like 5 stacks of Radiant. So yeah, and then we'll use our super for charging enemies, for burst damage, survivability in general. You know, just hit that panic super if you need to. That'll give you the damage resistance and some damage output. There's no great strategy to using our super other than survivability, and we want the roaming damage resistance, which a bubble does not offer us. And it is very easy to get kicked out of your bubble, especially during the boss fight, and then your bubble is basically useless. So that kind of covers all of our bases in theory. So now I'll go a little bit more into each and every part of that. I'm using Armamentarium, which is the exotic chest plate that has been around since Destiny 1, I believe. I'm pretty sure I had it in Destiny 1, and it was one of my favorite exotics back then, even though it is the simplest exotic. I mean, it just gives you 2 grenades. That's it. That's all it does. Nothing intricate, nothing fancy, just double grenades. So, I mean, two grenades is literally double the grenades that you would otherwise have. That's twice as much, 200% more. That's double the damage, double the potential. It gives us the opportunity to have offensive bulwark giving us grenade energy more often, because it'll be capped less. Like same for Whisper of Shards. Whisper of Shards is around 400 or 500% grenade energy. If you have double the grenades, then you're wasting less energy, less regeneration energy, because you have more charges available. So Armamentarium makes building into grenades worth it. Like, use those expensive fragments, the -20 discipline penalty from Echo of Undermining, use the lingering fragment, and you could even use Echo of Instability for volatile rounds. Just use them all. Max out those grenades. Vortex grenades are extremely potent, totally worth it. Now, as you may have seen in the title of the video, it's yeah, Heart of Inmost Light is 16 times worse than offensive bulwark anyways. Okay, so it's been a tough reckoning to accept that Heart of Inmost Light has been nerfed basically to the ground, but that's the case. It used to give about 150% extra grenade energy ability regeneration, which was substantial, but still not nearly as good as offensive bulwark ever was. But now Heart of Inmost Light has been nerfed to give you a mere 25% grenade energy. Compare that to 400% from offensive bulwark. What's the point? You're stacking like peanuts on nothing. It doesn't make a difference in the long run, and it only lasts for 5 seconds. And to set up empowered ×2 grenades would basically require you to dump all of your abilities in a very specific order with enemies nearby, just so in the end you can do a grenade that does more damage, but it's still less damage than the output of 2 grenades that you get from Armamentarium. And by the way, offensive Bulwark can be giving you that 400% grenade energy at all times. You just have to have an overshield. That's the only requirement. Heart of Endless Light is giving you hardly anything for doing a lot of work, wasting a lot of abilities, and that's going to get you killed more, because if you don't have any abilities, you're kind of screwed in a lot of instances. Aspects and fragments that I'm using, obviously offensive Bulwark and Bastion here, but all aspects are good on Void Titan. It's part of what makes this subclass so good. Controlled Demolition is very good. There's a trade-off obviously to not using it, but the volatile application that you get from Controlled Demolition from ability, from using your abilities, right? So your grenade will apply Volatile, your throwing shield or your shield bash will apply Volatile. That's good, but it pales in comparison to the amount of volatile rounds that you'll get from all the grenade spam in this build, from offensive Bulwark, from Bastion together, and Armamentarium. And then those souped up grenades, the volatile rounds, you're basically making up for Controlled Demolition. The only other thing that Controlled Demolition has to offer outside of the volatile application is the healing that you get from killing volatile targets. But you don't need that if you have an overshield. And like I said, the volatile, the amount of volatility that you can apply in this build basically does the same thing but better than Controlled Demolition anyway. Yeah, I mean, it competes with stuff like Devour, Voidwalker, and pretty much the only subclass or build that can output more volatility is Gerfalcon's Hauberk. So yeah, it's very good, and like I said, it makes building into all those fragments very worthwhile. And let's not forget that Volatile Flow, yes, it's a seasonal mod, it's the most popular seasonal mod of the season, that's going away next season, and I'm not using it in this run. So everything that you see, that's all the volatile explosions, that's with no help from the seasonal artifact at all. That is just Echo of Instability working all the time, because I've always got grenades and I'm always getting grenade kills. So yeah, when Volatile Flow goes away, you can rely on certain builds, and this is one of them. So I'm using Militia's Birthright. Well, as I said, it's a blinding GL or disorienting now. You can get it from Nightfalls. You can get an adept version, but it's pretty pointless because you're not using a Militia's Birthright or any disorienting grenade for anything other than disorienting. As long as it's got like auto-loading holster or slideways or some way to quickly reload, then you're pretty much golden. And it's pretty much the best single counter to Tormentors. There's lots of ways that you can deal with Tormentors. You can suppress them, you can suspend them, you can freeze them, you can blind them with arc, and you could just use a disorienting grenade launcher. And that is the only thing I'm using the grenade launcher for, so I've always got enough ammo to stun lock a Tormentor and slowly damage it at the same time. I will have enough ammo to do just that. Le Monarque is the exotic weapon that I'm using here. It's basically, you know, we don't have very many damage over time exotic weapons. Osteostriga is a good option here, but I've used Osteostriga already in this legendary build series, so I'm not going to be using it again, obviously. And the Monarque covers a lot of bases here because I'm fighting from range. It's void, so it goes with Sentinel and harmonizes with harmonic mods. Yeah, if I run out of Commemoration ammo, Le Monarque can basically do a good enough job at ticking away at boss damage. It's just extremely good. For a primary weapon, you can't really beat Le Monarque. And then, given that the playstyle that we're using here, with having volatile rounds from Echo of Instability, Le Monarque's basically going to be piercing all the phalanx shields as well. Intrinsically, it has overload rounds, so anything that's damaged from Le Monarque, from the poison tick damage, which is area of effect as well, so it can cover a lot of enemies at once, all those enemies will be overloaded, which means they're going to be doing less damage to me, which means that ultimately I have more damage resistance because I'm taking less damage. And then Commemoration, I've been saving my favorite machine gun for the last mission. I actually explored some other options because I feel like I've overused this weapon, but Commemoration is basically an exotic heavy machine gun. If you have Reconstruction on it, it's essentially like having Actium War Rig on, which is just insane. And like the weapon stats are very good. It's extremely stable. There's hardly any visual recoil. It's easy to land precision hits. It's good on ammo since we got the reserves buff this season and several damage buffs over the last few seasons. It's in a place right now where it is literally meta. It is machine guns in general are meta, but Commemoration is kind of like the workhorse jack of all trades. Machine gun, it can do literally everything, especially for solo flawless PvE content. So if you don't have one, look, it's fairly easy to farm. You can get them out of a Taniks checkpoint in Deepstone Crypt. If you haven't done it, just look for it on LFG and just join somebody. Like, it's one of those encounters where you don't even really need to know what's going on, and it's very easy to learn. Killing Taniks could take a matter of like 2 to 5 minutes, and then at the end of that encounter, there's a chance that it can drop Commemoration or Bequest, which is the Arc Sword. But yeah, you can get Commemoration to drop randomly from Taniks once per week per character. That's 3 chances at Commemoration per week. On top of that, once you do get a Commemoration to drop, then you can buy the Commemoration with the red border at the spoils table after Taniks once per week per account, right? So worst case scenario, you can have a crafted Commemoration in 5 weeks. Best case scenario, you could have one crafted in a couple weeks. Or if you farm Deepstone Crypt when it is up in the weekly rotation, then you can you could just farm it to death in that single week, and there's a pretty good chance that you can get it. So like I said, you want Reconstruction on it. I've got Enhanced Reconstruction and Enhanced Killing Tally. Killing Tally is pretty much the best damage perk to synergize with Reconstruction, because Killing Tally gives you, I can't remember exactly how much extra damage, but it's around 30% more damage, which is a lot for a weapon damage perk, just by killing 3 adds. Like, you can build up 3 stacks of Killing Tally total. So you kill 3 adds, very easy to do. Now you've got killing tally ×3 up as a buff on the left side of your screen, and you can focus that buff on bigger targets like majors and Calus and Tormentors. So that is, I try to, because I've used this weapon enough to get into the rhythm of it. If there's a lot of targets at once and there's one or two majors in that pack of ads, pull out the machine gun, just quickly kill a couple easy targets, and then focus the big target. Yeah, you'll slay out with this machine gun. And there's some other good perks on it as well, but obviously I'm recommending just going with Reconstruction Killing Tally. It's just universally the best. It is the god roll for the weapon. Personally, I'm actually crafting a second Commemoration right now with Repulsor Brace and Dragonfly that I'm going to be using for different builds. But you know, that's just because I kind of have nothing else to do anyways. Now, as far as the gameplay loop goes for this build, obviously grenades are our primary focus, and our barricades for our overshields. So you throw your grenade, you put your barricade down, you do a bunch of damage, and then you move. That's it. Extremely simple, almost as simple as the Armamentarium. Stats and abilities. As far as combat mods go, well, you may as well pick some mods that complement the gameplay loop that you're going to be using. So go with Bomber. That way when you do use your barricade, you get grenade energy, right? You just threw your grenade, now you put your barricade down, you instantly get a chunk of grenade energy. Use Bolstering Detonation, so that when you land a grenade and it damages targets, just damage, it will give you class ability energy, which means you get your barricade up faster. And remember, they actually nerfed the cooldown on barricades last season or at the beginning of Lightfall, so it's like you gotta wait like another 5 or 7 seconds or something like that, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is noticeable without Bolstering Detonation. So I would recommend just go with Bomber and Bolstering Detonation. That's just going to feed the loop of grenade, barricade, the whole time you're proccing offensive Bulwark, and you're staying safe, and you're dishing out damage, debuffing targets, making everything volatile. It's a good time. As far as stats go, tier 10 resilience, that's going to give us the maximum uptime on our barricade cooldown, and also of course it's going to give us the maximum amount of damage resistance, roughly 30%. Tier 10 discipline, if you can afford it, it can be a little bit tricky with the Echo of Undermining penalizing you for -20 discipline. I was fortunate enough on this build to have tier 10 discipline, but if you can't afford that, remember we have armor charge mods like Font of Focus, which gives you 30 stats in discipline just for one copy of Font of Focus on your arms. So that means theoretically, if you can have tier 7 discipline, you could have tier 10 discipline. You just have to have armor charge. That's the only thing, which, you know, you're not going to always have armor charge. But I'm just saying, there's ways that you can actually have tier 10 discipline without it. And then I would just average out your strength, your recovery. I think I'm tier 5 on each in this case, but just get as good as you can on those two, and intellect and mobility don't really matter so much, especially when you have shield bash, and it's not really, the intellect stat is kind of busted anyways. It's pointless to build into. You get super energy just from doing damage. Yeah, so, and by the way, Armamentarium tends to roll very nicely with well-distributed stats, and it seems to always be high stat. Like, anytime I get an Armamentarium, it's like 65 to 68 stats, and highly focused in resilience and discipline, and then recovery. Like, it's almost always a perfect roll. So yeah, if you're really particular about having those double 100s or triple 100s, Armamentarium is a fairly easy way to get that. Weapon mods, that I'm using here, well, I have to consider that I've already got a rally barricade, so I don't really need to build into reload speed on my weapons. Not just that, but come on, I got reconstruction on Commemoration, so when am I ever reloading that? I think I reload it maybe once in this entire mission. And then I've got a bow, so yeah, reloaders do help bows with fast, you know, you're knocking your arrows faster, but like I said, I got the rally barricade for that. And there's not really any downtime to reloading your bow, right? It's just knocking one arrow at a time. Heavy ammo finder, no point in using special ammo finder. Like the disorienting grenade launcher is simply for tormentors, that's it. I never run out of special. And I get plenty of special bricks to drop anyways. Just make sure you got that heavy ammo, because that's going to make everything... The more heavy ammo you have, the smoother this mission is going to be. The quicker enemies will die, the safer you will be. I'm also using harmonic targeting because I had room on my helmet, which is actually a pretty useful mod. It's not one that I would prioritize per se, but if you have room for it, get a feel for it. If you're on console and controller like me on PS5, you know, with a controller, aim assist is a huge factor, and it's definitely stickier if you're trying to do precision damage, or you just want to be quick to acquire targets in your crosshairs. Use harmonic targeting. That way my void weapons here are just, you know, they just feel better and they're landing more shots because I'm consistently on target. Triple copy of void weapon surge on the legs. So you may have noticed I've pretty much used 3 copies of surge mods in every single one of my builds, because 22% extra damage, and yeah, I know it's diminishing returns per copy, but it's still worth it. Like 1 copy is 10% extra damage, 2 is 17%, 3 is 22%. 22% is almost radiant. So that's just an incredibly nice bonus to have for your weapons when you have armor charge. And by the way, Bungie, can we get a harmonic surge? Like, what? So we have harmonic siphon mods, we have harmonic unflinching, we have harmonic reloader, we have harmonic targeting, etc. We have like a harmonic variant of every single weapon mod that costs less energy than the specific elemental ones. Why don't we have one for weapon surges? That would make a huge difference for build crafting, because then you wouldn't have to use like your entire leg armor for just weapon surges, because right now it costs 9 energy to have 3 copies, and then that leaves you with, like, you know, a 5-piece stat for discipline or something. And while I'm on that topic, can we I know we have the seasonal mods that reduce energy costs. Like this season we have reduced strand, void, grenades, solar. But I thought the whole point of this new build crafting system and the new seasonal artifact was that we weren't going to have to equip seasonal artifact mods on our gear. Like, I thought we were getting away from that. But really we're not, because we still have to equip all these discounted mods. They're not just automatic. So yeah, it's just a minor annoyance. So yeah, and then as far as armor charge goes, obviously I need that armor charge to get that weapon damage, right? And if you're using like font of focus, like what I was talking about earlier, for 30 more stats and discipline, you're gonna need the armor charge. So the way I'm getting it is through, well, threefold. I have harmonic siphon, I have heavy-handed, and I have shield break charge. Harmonic siphon, so like basically every other void weapon kill. I think there's a slight internal cooldown, but it's going to produce normal power. and then I can go pick it up. I got armor charge. Heavy-handed, charged melee kills, so my shield bash, or melee kills while I have an overshield count as basically a charged melee, and it produces an orb of power. So I generally prefer heavy-handed, even on non-melee builds, over firepower, because firepower, although it guarantees you an orb of power, it's dropping that power at long range, right? Because usually you're using your grenade to hit enemies that are far away, that aren't like right up on you, which means that you then have to like go out and get the orb of power, which isn't always convenient. So heavy-handed is just like it's almost like an automatic way to get armor charge. If an enemy's in your face, punch him, boom, you got armor charge. So yeah, and then shield break charge. This might be the first time I've used it, and it was actually amazing how convenient it made getting armor charge from range, because part of the gameplay loop, like I said, is playing at range behind your barricade and just chucking grenades, and that doesn't entice. You're not enticed to go out into the middle of all the enemies and take that risk just to go collect an orb of power to get armor charge, right? So you go and you're risking your life to go and get the potential for a bonus to weapon damage. And shield break charge, there's plenty of void shields in this mission, so it was actually yeah, I was able to get armor charge several times throughout here just by staying put, which is extremely good, and that's going to make shoot to loot next season very useful as well, because you'll be able to pick up not just bricks of ammo with a shoot to loot weapon from far, but you'll also be able to pick orbs of power to get armor charge. So that'll be pretty fun. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the build. And then as far as Calus goes, basically there's 3 things that can hurt you here. 1 is tunnel vision, 2 is being stationary for too long, and 3 is basically rotating at the wrong time or making bad rotations. And you have to be aware of the types of enemies that you're going to be coming across and when certain enemies spawn, like namely the Tormentors. Before the Tormentors become enraged, that's what how I like to look at it, right? Once you pop their 2 shoulder caps, they burst out in like this darkness blast, and then their crit spot is open on their chest. So prior to that, they're generally not very threatening. They're slow moving, like molasses. As soon as you pop their shoulders, then they get enraged and they charge you. So that's when you need to make sure 100% of your attention is basically focused on neutralizing the Tormentors while you do damage. Other threatening targets, backpack cabals. When you're rotating, make sure that you're on the inside of them and not on the outside, because if you get anywhere close to them, like 10 feet away, they will push you off the map with their backpack. So if you're on the outside, you're going off the map. If you're on the inside, they'll push you into the map. Like, you want to stay on the map, so be aware of your position when you approach backpack cabals. Not just that, but like I said earlier, they can explode too, so maybe don't shield bash them, or maybe don't do too much damage to them when you're right up close to them. And then the tunnel vision is key, right? Obviously you want to just do as much sustained damage to Calus that you can, but there's a lot going on in the environment with the ads, and when he calls down his darkness blast, he can basically instantly kill you. So you need to pay attention to when he does that. He'll put his arm up in the air, and then he'll call down that rain of darkness. That is like one of the most dangerous mechanics in the fight. So just make sure that you're not stationary for too long. Know when to post up and do damage, and know when to look around, and know when to move. Be aware of your surroundings. Like if you're doing damage on the square platform, be aware that there could be some objects in your way, like hard cover, that's going to stop you from jumping up over onto the catwalk. And then if you get stuck when he calls down that Rain of Darkness, you're dead. So it's basically just being aware. Anyways, that about covers it. I'll let you finish watching this cutscene, and I look forward to seeing you in the next season. And don't forget, if you made it through this far, you may as well like the video, or dislike it if you want, and let me know what you didn't like, and drop a sub. I would appreciate it greatly. Anyways, I will see you in the next season if I don't post anything before this season ends. So take care. See you next time.
Finality takes shape.
It's creating the link.
At long last.
Destroy it.
What just happened?
We just lost.
Zavala, come in.